He was talking to Everest when their connection was suddenly severed, an action that took him by surprise as he knew full well he'd never do such a thing, and nor would she. First assuming she'd reappear on the cameras, what few still worked, he watched the monitors closely, only to be met with nothing. Unable to suppress his worries, Dwayne abandoned his position and ran to find his friend. Ignoring the frigid winds chilling into his bones, the Dane fled the security room and emerged in what could only be described as a cavern made entirely of ice. The water pressure mixing with the winter had transformed the ski lounge into a frozen palace, which would have been a wondrous sight if he wasn't walking in the shadow of death with every step. His limbs were feeling more stiff than usual, and breathing was becoming a notoriously difficult motion. The blizzard smiled an icy grin as it watched him run, further drowning the freezing dog into its grasp. Running entirely on adrenaline, Dwayne followed Everest's path until he reached her where she fell, having fainted at the sight of Jake's corpse. He found her slouched on her side, lying motionless on the metal floor. Her fur was frosted with shining particles, fallen to the ground as if she had simply fallen asleep. Fearing the worst, Dwayne grabbed the fainted husky in his teeth and hastily pulled her deeper into the safe room, taking refuge in another room with a sealable door. The sight of Everest slumped unconscious made his breath catch in his throat, his heart pounding into his nerves. He was scared to move her any further, horrified at the thought of touching her anymore would break her already frail frame. All he could do was sit before her, petrified in the dark room as anguish ravaged his mind. There they dwelled in dark silence, nothing but the fearful whimpers of a Great Dane in the air. At least they were safe, the only gracing thought in Dwayne's mind to keep him sane. The creature outside couldn't get through the door, and there were no open ceiling vents in the room it could use to ambush them. That didn't stop the constant darting of gazes, Dwayne shakily looking at every corner of the room with a pit in his stomach. He had witnessed it upon entering the room. Jake's remains. It was a scene that gutted him into the very soul, carving a vile image into his mind he'd never forget again. Jake was indeed in the safe room, as Everest correctly guessed. He was right there in the center waiting for her, in dozens of pieces. Beneath an open ceiling vent, a gaping entryway for the Mintiaga's travel, laid the massacred gore that were once a human owner. He had been jumped from above and swiftly dispatched, a phone dropping from his hand and breaking on the ground. Perhaps he had tried to call for help, ringing anyone who could possibly hear him, only to buckle under the blizzard smothering of the signals. He would have likely only had seconds to react, too distracted at the concerns for his lost husky. Everest, meanwhile, was dreaming. Her mind had longed for an escape since the Mintiaga slew Hubcap, pleading over and over again for it to just be a horrible nightmare. In her catatonic state, her subconscious gathered what it could and fled to a sunny world where the winter was burned away. She opened her eyes to a bright green field twinkling with flowers, the sun pleasantly blanketing her where the cold had snapped its jaws. Even with her layered fur, the warmth was almost perfectly comfortable, healing away her frozen burns. Her brain wiped away the memory of her owner, instead recreating Jake's smiling, embracing arms running toward her. The Paw Patrol was with him, happily running behind him, eager to reunite with the rescued husky. Skye was in the lead, completely outrunning Chase and diving into Everest's loving hold. They'd never be separated again. She danced in her dream for some time, until slowly it all began to darken. The husky watched in confusion as Skye and Jake were pulled from her arms, a faint feeling of cold beginning to poke her tail. Gradually it began to leach up her body, spreading a frozen discomfort as the sun was blackened in the sky. Her dream, Her only escape from the horrid nightmare was over. She jolted awake in the dark room, flailing out her weary limbs. Ah! She cried out, dozens of terrifying memories all forcing back into her head at once until she screamed into the darkness. Jake! Dwayne jumped at her awakening, still increasingly tense. Once he realized it was not the creature having spontaneously appeared in the room, his face spread with joy. Everest! You're alive! Alive? What? She looked around with frenzied motions. Where am I? Where's Jake? Jake, Dwayne said, hesitating as he watched her. Didn't you see it? No! The husky faced him with a distraught expression. I saw nothing! He's here! I know he's here! Just a vision, she repeated in her head. It was all a vision, a horrible trick of the mind. She trembled with chaotic thoughts, screaming at her only remaining friend in the lounge. The Dane frowned, taking a step to her. Everest, what are you talking about? I saw it too. You didn't see anything! She shouted, all her strength crumbling at her paws. It was a trick! He's not! She held out an accusing paw at him, opening her muzzle to scream anything she could muster. But not a single sound left her. Dwayne watched her hold the pose for a few seconds. Everest. The husky stood, almost appearing as if she was about to attack him. Slowly, her anger melted, her lifted paw beginning to tremble. Her composure shattered to pieces, grief encompassing any scrap of rage she could have possibly lashed with. There was nothing left of her now. What was a dog without their owner? She had never known the meaning of being a stray. Dozens of times had she felt sympathy for the unfortunate they passed by on the streets. Collapsing to the floor, she couldn't even find a single word to express the hollowness that tore into her heart. She buried her face in her paws, choking back sobs as that one horrible image flashed in her mind. Jake was long dead, slaughtered in what he assumed was safety with not even a last word to etch his throat. There was no telling how long he'd been there. For all she knew, he could have been one of the very first to die. Minutes stretched into eternity as Everest's tears slowed to a halt, leaving her drained of any motivation to keep going. She lifted her head, meeting Dwayne's compassionate gaze with eyes red-rimmed and swollen. What? She choked out. What am I supposed to do now? Dwayne was torn at the raw agony in her voice. He held his place for a few seconds, unable to find any direction of what to do. Surrendering to the only thing he could think of, he gently moved forward, wrapping his arms around Everest in a warm embrace. He held her close, offering what little support he could possibly give to the defeated dog. Her sorrow was inconsolable, but in Dwayne's arms, a fleeting sense of comfort touched her frozen heart. We're still alive, he whispered, holding her close. We can still get out of here. Think of everything you've faced in the past. He couldn't visibly see if his words have any effect, only able to see Everest's switching ear and unmoving tail. Even when things were really, really bad, you always found a way out. He sighed into her fur. I think it's time we get out of here. For good. Gently breaking their embrace, Dwayne leaned back a little on his hind paws. He unzipped his biker jacket and draped it around Everest's trembling body. Everest's eyes widened at the gesture, staring into his gaze. Dwayne, you'll freeze! He waved off her words with a tensed paw. I'll manage. It kinda looks better on you anyway. He chuckled as he zipped her up, watching his partner look down at her new outfit. To be honest, I was never that much of a biker anyway. Motorcycles are too loud. Dwayne. No, keep it. He leaned in close to her, gently gripping her shoulders with a reassuring smile. Despite the icy chill that still lingered in the air, their hearts flickered with warmth as their eyes met, the cascade of dark thoughts briefly unable to reach them. Even with his loving expression, Everest still visibly deflated, frowning at the floor knowing whom she had lost. Jake had been many things to her. An owner, a friend, even a father on occasions. Never would she ever be ready to lose it all in a night, with nothing but old memories to preserve the feelings they shared together. Her expression hardened, body tensing up slightly against the cold. Her eyes searched the ground, processing information in her mind. He wouldn't have wanted this. She looked up at her companion. Jake wouldn't have wanted me to die in some hunting ground. Furrowing her brows, she gave Dwayne a narrowed stare. He would have told me to get out. He would have wanted me to live. Maybe even distract the creatures so I could run away. Dwayne nodded, giving her a reassuring, although shivering smile. Holding her arms, meeting Dwayne in her own embrace and interlocking them together, she flattened her ears in cold determination. We are getting the hell out of here. Agreed. Do we have anything we can drive out? The Dane asked. It took the husky a few moments, thinking over an answer before she gave him a nod. My kennel. Your kennel? It can turn into a snowcat, she said, breaking their hold on each other. It was a gift from the Paw Patrol. It's essentially a tracked vehicle that can drive on the snow. And it drives fast. It's our way out. Great. Where is it? It's Everest blinked, turning away to ponder her plan of action. It's outside, somewhere in front of the lounge. Probably buried in snow by now. We'll have to dig it out. Walking to the edge of the fortified room, she eyed up the sealed door. Meaning, we have to go back out there. The creature was still very likely hovering around the lounge, skittering along every wall and ceiling until it laid eyes on a lost puppy. If we can get to the front door, go outside, dig out my kennel, I can transform it and we can ride out. But if the creature gets even a glimpse of us, she hesitated, a twinge of fear in her voice, then we're dead. The exposed Dane walked to her side. Then we'll have to move quickly. I don't think the cameras are an option anymore. And I'm not sending you back down there. She took a moment to gather her bearings. This will have to be absolutely perfect. A single mistake will doom us. A shaking breath left her, wondering if she was lying to herself. I have no idea if I can pull this off, but by God, I'm gonna try. With Dwayne at her side, she unlocked the door that so tightly protected them from the outer elements. Pushing it open with her nose, Everest instantly froze in shock at the room before her. It was the main area of the safe room, still with every bloodied piece of Jake's remains. Her traumatized eyes feverishly scanned each arm, leg, and piece of flesh scattered about the red floor. He didn't stand a chance against the Mintiarga. His whole body was slaughtered into meat like a pig at the butcher. Shreds of his clothes either idly soaked in the blood or acted as nets to keep the pieces from collapsing into piles of human gore. Visibly cringing at the sight, Dwayne looked toward his paralyzed friend. Everest? She didn't respond for a few seconds, still standing in horror at the gruesome sight before her. Then slowly she turned her head to him, her face slathered in agony. Get me a trash bag. They moved as a grief-soaked pair, Dwayne keeping his ears pricked while Everest dragged a large trash bag, heavy and leaving a red trail behind it. Trekking down the hallways and climbing over the collapsed debris, They emerged in the north hallway where 2 rooms branched at their sides. Everest beckoned Dwayne inside one of them, taking the bag with her as they entered what was once a locker room meant for patrons. The Mintiarga had undoubtedly infiltrated this particular area a long time ago, as its windows were shattered outward for the blizzard to gratefully pile inside. However, there were no open vents in here, and the door was firmly closed behind them. It wasn't secure by any means, but the Mintiarga had no way of sneaking in unless it either broke in or came from the outside. Breaking in would alert both dogs, leaving them to flee outside. Going outside would paint the invisible creature in frost, allowing Everest to perfectly spot it stalking nearby. The 2 were safe at least, safe enough that they could do what needed to be done. Thinking nothing of the danger, Everest walked to an open window, uttering for Dwayne to come over. Together, they lifted the bag and heaved it through the windowsill, hearing it plop down into the snow outside. "What are we doing?" Dwayne asked. Everest held up a paw. "Wait here." Taking a sharp breath, she jumped up and climbed through the window. Landing outside, she was immediately assaulted by the full power of the blizzard, as no longer was she protected by the walls of the lounge. The husky had left her safety, crossing into the winter's blistering realm with the violent wind and snow to greet her. She looked around for a moment, trying to squint through the blinding white for any possible thing that could have been waiting for her. Whatever, she thought with a huff. She was made for this weather from the beginning. The winter was her home, no matter what morbid face it wore. Scoffing at the winds, she took the bloodied trash bag in her teeth and pulled it further out, leaving a trail in the snow. Coming to a small hill of white, she dropped the bag and walked a few feet away, leaning down to dig. Excavating the ground was always a dog's specialty. There wasn't a single breed out there who didn't love to dig a good hole. Putting her front paws to work, she dug out clumps of snow and kicked them behind her, soon forming a deep pit in the snow. The cold bit at her with every scoop she made, but she ignored it, even easier with Dwayne's jacket warming her in tandem. Her mind blank with fog, she wordlessly jumped out and returned to the trash bag, already crystallizing from the frost. With a heavy heart, she pulled it over to the pit and pushed it in. She could only gather so much of Jake. Several pieces, or clumps more accurately, were left behind. Anyone potentially stumbling on a scene like that would conclude that some poor soul had been torn to shreds. Only recognizable bits they collected, and Everest really didn't want to touch the raw gore strewn about. Grief attacked once more as she began covering the pit, her quivering breaths coming out as misty puffs. Tears welled in her eyes as she covered the bag in snow, slightly blurring her vision as she worked. Once the trash bag was firmly covered, the pit vanished before her, once again appearing to be nothing more than a massive sheet of snow spanning here for miles. But here, in this particular spot, things were different. This was where Everest buried him, letting go of everything she had clung her life to. She sat down before the blank ground, hanging her head with silent utters in love and gratitude for everything they had shared. Truly, she had been blessed to have such a beautiful thing, and even now that it all lay to rest, the beloved memories of her owner would forever be etched in her heart. The husky stood up in the snow, taking one last look at the burial site. Bringing a paw to her neck, she unclipped her collar, still bearing the emblem she had worn since day one. A single white tree behind a blue sky, the very symbol that carried her name. Dropping the accessory into the snow, she pushed it down with her paw, burying it atop her owner. Her tears falling to ice in the snow, she turned and walked away. Bye, Jake. Dwayne was still waiting in the locker room when Everest jumped back through the window, landing on the floor and approaching him. "It's done," she said simply, her voice choking with emotion. The Dane nodded in understanding. "My kennel is outside, but when I start the snowcat, it's going to be loud. Loud enough that it'll lure that thing right at us." "You can't start it fast enough?" Dwayne said with a tilt of his head. "Start it, then floor the gas pedal?" "Well, sure, but it needs a few seconds to actually transform. 6 or 7 seconds, then starting it will take more time in itself. This could be the last thing we ever do." "Then," Dwayne looked aside for a moment, "we need a distraction." "That's what I was thinking, but I can't think of anything in this damn place that still works after all that's happened," Everest said in exasperation, looking up at the frozen camera that hung on the wall. "The camera systems are no doubt completely shot, and there's not a scrap of electric power left in the lounge." "Well, not everything is worthless. We could always, you know..." "What?" Dwayne shrugged. "Make something?" Raising an eyebrow, Everest gave him an odd look. "Make? Like, build our own distraction?" "Why not? I learned plenty of things working on those bikes and towers." Dwayne nodded, already looking around the room for things. "We probably wouldn't even need to build something. Just anything that could be loud enough to draw it near." "Okay, but what?" Everest flattened her ears, starting to become agitated. "I already said nothing works here anymore! What are we supposed to do with a shitload of ice and ski equipment?" Her partner held his composure. "We don't need to make anything. Look." He held up his paw, pointing at something behind her. Still skeptical, Everest turned her head, looking where he was gesturing. Her eyes fell on the wall behind her, coated with ice and waterlogged plaster. She didn't understand at first, scanning the surface she had seen hundreds of times in her life, until her gaze rested on one red object quietly lingering in the corner. A fire extinguisher. "Those things are pretty explosive from what I recall." The Dane walked beside her, eyeing up the emergency tool. "I don't think it would be pretty hard to rig one." Narrowing his eyes at the device, his mind took to work for what he'd need. "I just need something to spark it, then, well, kaboom!" Everest hadn't said anything, still scanning the extinguisher before her. The gears turning in her mind, she met his gaze. "That would actually work," she said, incredulous at the reveal. "How would you spark it?" "I'll think of something." Dwayne jumped up, running to unhinge the pressurized container from the wall. "I remember something Hubcap said about that. I know it'll work. I just need to find 2 things." "Huh," was all Everest could utter. "You fucking genius." "Thank you." The Dane gave her a sweet smile, wagging his tail while he worked. The plan started piecing together in her mind, an hour of drive surging through both dogs as escape felt on the horizon. "If you can rig that thing to blow, we can set it off in one of the farther rooms," Everest said, rushing to help him. "Digging out my kennel won't be loud at all, so we can wait until..." Everything clicked at once, her eyes widening. "I dig out my kennel, you sound the explosion, I start the car, and then... we're out!" Elation flooding through her, a grin peeled across her face, lighting up the husky in resolve. "All right, let's do it."